So in the previous class, we were discussing about antipsychotics, specifically the first generation antipsychotics or classical antipsychotics. In that, we were discussing about one very specific, the called chlorpromazine, also called CPZ. Now, in that, I told you that this fellow will block. It has several actions. Okay, it will block several systems. Specifically, we are going one by one. The first system it will block. um, See, it is primarily a dopamine blocker, so it will block every part of your brain or every part of your body wherever dopamine plays a role. All right, it will not select in between any particular location of dopamine. See, it is blocking D2 receptor. That is true. You have 5 types of dopamine receptors: D1, D2, D3, D4, D5. Okay, but even though it is targeting specifically D2 type of receptors, D2 receptors are present several places in your body. Okay, other than that, it will block some other parts as well. So if we talk only about dopamine receptors, it will block in basal ganglia, limbic area, pituitary gland, and it will affect your CTZ. So all of them are affected. So that was the first one. So your basal ganglia, I just write it like this. The other day when we went into a little bit more detail. Pituitary, 1 second, right, limbic area, basal ganglia, then your pituitary, and finally your CTZ. It will block all of these. One beneficial function is that if it is blocking CTZ, it can work as an anti-emetic. It can block the sensation of vomiting. So that can be advantageous. Sometimes chlorpromazine is given as an anti-emetic as well. All right, that was the initial part where it is blocking dopamine receptor. Okay, so I'll just write it here. It is dopamine blockage. Okay, is causing all of these effects. Now, other than this, it will also block your muscarinic receptor. What is muscarinic receptor? Now, the other day we were discussing about, even when we discussed about PUD, I told you about sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, right? One of the main neurotransmitter of your parasympathetic nervous system is acetylcholine. Predominantly, most of the neurons in your parasympathetic nervous system will function using um, acetylcholine. All right, that is why it is also called cholinergic system. Or at least all the neurons that are associated with acetylcholine are called cholinergic system. Okay, cholinergic neurons. Now, your acetylcholine will work through certain types of receptors. Okay, they are broadly classified into two types: NN and NM. All right, 1 second, I'll show you an image. It will be a little bit easier to understand through that. Mm, yeah, see. Uh, who is Florence? Mamu Florence or Mamu? I'm not sure whether I'm pronouncing it correctly. Is he a
Sir,
classmate?
Mamata, yes, sir.
Mamata. Okay. All right. Right. Coming back to our cholinergic receptors. Right. So you have two specific type of cholinergic receptors. You will have nicotinic receptors and muscarinic receptors. They are named like this because if you give nicotine to a patient, these receptors will light up or they will get an agonistic function. And if you give a person muscarine, muscarine is also a substance. If you give muscarine, it will work through these receptors or these receptors will get activated. Okay, though that is the basic difference between nicotinic and muscarinic receptors. This nicotine is the same nicotine that you find in cigarettes. That is why people who generally smoke, they will have activation of nicotinic receptors. Okay, it can cause muscle relaxation, it can cause what do you call, increased function of CNS, temporary increase in the function of CNS. Already, or at least it will seem so. That is why smokers tend to get addicted to that feeling. Now, when we talk about cholinergic receptors, again, nicotinic has two different types. You have NN and NM. Okay, a neuronal or NN type of receptors are those that will be present in a synapse. Okay, they will be particularly present on a postsynaptic neuron. Okay, and now when a neurotransmitter is coming out of a presynaptic neuron and goes and attaches to your postsynaptic neuron, near the site of attachment you will have receptors. Those receptors are NN type of receptors. Okay, that is why the location is adrenal medulla. They'll be present near your immune cells. They are present in your CNS and in your ganglia. Okay, they are mostly postsynaptic. Then you have something called NM receptors. These are present on your motor end plates. So if I have a motor function, that is basically you get a sensation, and let's suppose your brain is relaying a motor signal to that particular effector muscle. Okay, let's suppose I want to move my arm. Okay, the first what do you call impulse will be, I need to know the sensation, basically the spatial alignment of my arm, where my arm is. Okay, the spatial presence of my arm, I need to know that wherever it is, if it is kept on a desk, or if it is hanging in the beside my body, or if I have lifted it. Your body needs to know that. Even if you can see, your body needs to know where it is in position, so that to change that position. All right, initially you get a sensory response from there, wherein motor response is relayed from your motor center, sensory to motor, then motor to your effector muscles. So let's suppose from your motor cortex, it is going to the muscles of your biceps, where it is your biceps are contracting and you are basically lifting your forearm up, or you're moving your arm basically. That happens at a muscular level. So at one point what will happen is, from neuron to neuron, neuron to neuron, at one point neuron to muscle, the relay of muscle, relay of message will happen between neuron to muscle. That connection in between neuron and muscle is called a neuronal plate. ठीक है, or neuronal motor end plate बोलते हैं उसको, wherein your muscle is getting the information directly from a particular neuron. All right, that is a NM, that place, that junction, at the junction you will have NM type of receptors, NM type of nicotinic receptors. Okay, generally using acetylcholine, that is how muscle contraction occurs. That is about nicotinic receptors. Then you have muscarinic receptors. Now muscarinic receptors you will find in uh, it is categorized into M1, M3, M5 and M2 and M4 because of the uses that were found. Mostly the significant type of muscarinic receptors that you find in your body will be M1, M3 and M5. Okay, M2 and M4 have not been understood completely, to put it in a simpler way. M2 and M5 are relatively obscure for now. M1, M3, M5 we know a little bit about them, not a lot, but still we know better than M2 and M4. Now, if you try to block muscarinic receptors, specifically chlorpromazine, so I hope you understood cholinergic receptors a little bit. We'll go over it in, you have cholinergic system as well. One drug, anticholinergics will get drugs hai tum logon ko. In that we can go into a little bit more detail, but this is the basic picture of how acetylcholine will work through. The same way when we discussed about adrenergic receptors and adrenaline, I told you you have different types of adrenergic receptors: alpha 1, alpha 2, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3. The same way cholinergic receptors will be of these categories. Okay, so coming back to our chlorpromazine, this fellow, the other function it does is it will block your muscarinic receptors. What happens if you block your muscarinic receptors? You will get anticholinergic effects. So see, muscarine is something that is facilitating acetylcholine, meaning it is a agonist for acetylcholine. Whenever there is acetylcholine, muscarinic receptors will light up, okay, or they will work. If I'm trying to block muscarinic receptors, I will get anticholinergic function, okay, or anticholinergic effects. So those anticholinergic effects will basically include blurred vision. You will have dry mouth. Okay, your autonomic response decreases. So one of the main function of your cholinergic system is maintaining autonomic response. Okay, sweating decreases or decreased sweating, either way. Bodily secretions decrease. GI secretion, any type of bodily secretions will decrease. It might cause constipation because your autonomic system is responsible for maintenance of peristalsis. Yeah, Sridhar, do you have a doubt? Raise your hand. No? Okay. And it will cause urinary retention. So all of this will happen when you block muscarinic receptors. That is what chlorpromazine will do. So from this you can understand the side effects as well in a way. Okay. Even if, see, these are unwanted effects. Now let's suppose I am trying to give chlorpromazine specifically to treat psychosis or as an antipsychotic, or even if I give it for vomiting, for to block my CTZ and to give it as an anti-emetic drug to block vomiting, I will get all of these unnecessary effects as well. Those will come under adverse effects, or they will come under side effects specifically. I do not want all of these. I do not want my patient to undergo constipation or urinary retention. See, urinary retention as such is bad, but if it happens in someone who is hypertensive, it will be even more bad, right? Things like that. Now, that is one function of your chlorpromazine. It blocks your muscarinic receptors. Other than that, it will also block your alpha 1 adrenergic receptors. Okay, as I just told you, adrenergic receptors in turn will have 5 categories: 2 of alpha and 3 of beta. We discussed about them in asthma as well. So if you block alpha 1 adrenergic receptors, they are called adrenergic because they work through adrenaline, right? It will cause nasal stuffiness and it will cause hypotension. Okay, you can think of it in this way as well. If you stimulate alpha 1 adrenergic receptors, you will be able to breathe easily. You will not have enough nasal stuffiness, or to put it another way, you will not have mucus blocking your nose, and you will have slight spike in blood pressure. Okay, not exactly hypertension, but slight spike in blood pressure. So that is another way you can remember it if you are finding it difficult to memorize. The last effect that will have is it will block H1 histamine receptors. Now, when we were discussing about asthma as well as PUD, we discussed what is histamine receptors and what are H1 receptors and H2 receptors. In PUD, we were trying to block H2 receptors. In asthma, we were trying to block H1 receptors, right? One will cause muscle contraction, the other will cause smooth muscle relaxation. So if I block H1 receptors, it will specifically cause sedation and it will cause antihistaminic effects. Okay, not get into what are antihistaminic effects because we've already went through them. So one important effect that will happen is sedation, right? So you should be careful of giving chlorpromazine to people. At least you have to warn patients that sedation might occur, and blurred vision and all might occur. So please do not drive after taking chlorpromazine. Generally speaking, most antipsychotics they will sedate or drowse the patient a little bit, to an extent that they will not be alert enough to do reflexive activity, things like maybe crossing the road, or things like that, maybe cutting vegetables, or particular just driving. All of those require proper attention. If you are sedated or you are drowsy, you might harm yourself. So these are all the effects of chlorpromazine. It will block all of these. Because of this, it has a very specific set of adverse effects. Okay, its adverse effect, or the most important adverse effect it will have, is extrapyramidal symptoms. These extrapyramidal symptoms refer to symptoms that are movement disorders. Okay, so specifically speaking, इन लोगों को EPS भी बोलते हैं. Okay, so these are also called EPS. Other antipsychotics also have EPS, extrapyramidal symptoms, or they will also have a side effect which is EPS, but this one has prominent. Specifically, it will cause acute dyskinesia or acute dystonia. Acute dystonia is basically facial grimacing. The patient will not be able to control their muscle contraction. It is basically uncontrolled muscle contractions in different parts of their body. So acute dystonia will be characterized by facial grimacing tics, in the sense that you will have facial twitching. Literally their face will twitch here and there because of uncontrolled muscle contractions. They might have muscle spasms, or they might have involuntary movement wherein their hand is moving or their leg is moving or any of the body part is moving involuntary, out of their control. That is acute dystonia. That is one extrapyramidal symptom. Other than that, Parkinsonism like symptoms. So Parkinsonism-like symptoms basically will include bradykinesia, where they're not able to walk properly, or tremors or rigidity, muscle rigidity, with that they're not able to move there. So rigidity is basically a condition in which the patient will not be flexible enough to move. Okay, it can occur in joints, or it can occur in single large muscle groups, wherein they'll not be able to they'll not be able to walk. If it occurs to an extreme degree, they will not even be able to move or get up from bed. Okay, if they have specifically very severe type of rigidity, imagine this: if you are extremely rigid in the morning, okay, you will not be able to bend yourself and get yourself off of bed. Okay, if you try to roll, you will not get up, you'll fall down. Okay, if you are extremely rigid, that is what happens in Parkinson's patients. So Parkinsonism like symptoms, that is one symptom that comes under EPS. Then perioral tremors will occur. Perioral tremors. This is also called rabbit syndrome. Basically, if you have seen a rabbit, uh, you'll see that the patient, yeah, uh, please refrain from talking in the main chat group. Right. Perioral tremors, these are basically involuntary rhythmic motions of the upper lip. Okay, this will not involve tongue movement, but it will only involve upper lip movement. If you see in rabbits, they can what you call specifically move their upper lip. So the patient's upper lip will have something like that. That is called perioral tremor. That is also why it is called rabbit syndrome, wherein the patient will involuntarily be moving their upper lip. Okay, it is not in their control. Then you have akathisia. Akathisia is basically one second. Akathisia. Right. This is a feel of kind of uncomfortable feeling. Okay, they will specifically in their legs, to an extent that the patient will have either, even if they're sitting down, they will be restless and they'll be moving their legs, they'll be rocking their legs. Or if you've seen children, if you make them sit on something, and generally speaking their legs do not touch the ground, so they keep on swinging their legs, right? That is what happens in akathisia. Uh, to a patient who has akathisia, they will be restless enough where they will have to get up and walk. Okay, they'll not be comfortable sitting down, and they need to constantly keep walking. That is akathisia. In some patients, there might be tardive dyskinesia as well, wherein meaning tardive dyskinesia is a condition in which after therapy, months or years after therapy, after treatment, the patient will have involuntary movements of their face, of their tongue, of their eyelids, all their limbs as well. So all of these will come under extrapyramidal symptoms. So those are the symptoms of your chlorpromazine. Now, specifically coming to uses of chlorpromazine, you can use it in psychiatric disorders like schizophrenia, you can use, or you can use it in delirium, and you can use it in dementia. Right, all of them will respond very well, or chlorpromazine will treat them very well. That is one. But again, it is patient specific. Okay, sometimes drugs simply do not work, and antipsychotics generally take a long time to show their effect, maybe uh, at least 1 or 2 weeks, sometimes a couple of months as well. All right, so till then the patient will be suffering. You cannot do anything, because the amount of, here we are basically blocking dopamine for a long period of time. Dopamine needs to keep on being blocked for you to see significant change. Right. Then you can use it in other neuropsychiatric conditions, like for chronic alcoholism, for Huntington's disease, things like that. All right. Then you can also use it for nausea and vomiting, because it is a very good antiemetic. It can be used for nausea as well as vomiting. Also, one peculiar use of chlorpromazine is for hiccups. Okay, you can use them for hiccups. So though we do not know the exact mechanism of hiccups, chlorpromazine has been effective in treating them. There is that. Coming to the next drug, so other popular drug is haloperidol. Okay, haloperidol is a very potent antipsychotic with action similar to chlorpromazine. It will work the same way as chlorpromazine. but there are a few specific advantages. The advantage being that it will have lesser incidence of autonomic side effects. So the digestive side effects, the autonomic side effects you will not see, meaning you can use it in older patients. Now let's suppose autonomic side effects will specifically include these. ये muscarinic receptors को block कर रहे जो side effects are, those are autonomic side effects, okay, because they are working through your autonomic nervous system. Haloperidol can avoid that, or at least there is lesser incidence of a patient getting these side effects with haloperidol when compared to chlorpromazine. Meaning it is safer in older patients. Now in older patients you do not want such symptoms, okay, it will be even more problem if generally old people themselves have constipation or they have urinary retention, things like that. You do not want to aggravate their problems even more, so in those conditions you can give haloperidol. Okay, it also has a longer t half, almost 24 hours, so the frequency of the dose can be decreased significantly. Coming to second generation antipsychotics, or they are also called newer antipsychotics or atypical antipsychotics. So second gen or atypical antipsychotics. Though these are, at least see, the reason why antipsychotics, second gen antipsychotics were made were because of the extreme side effects of the first generation. But the thing is that second generation antipsychotics have their own set of very specific side effects. You cannot exactly avoid them. They have some serious side effects of their own as well, to the point that second generation antipsychotics are only given in case first generation is not working. Okay, initially if you get a patient who is psychotic or who has some psychotic disorder, you start off with first generation. If it is not working, only then you proceed to second gen. Okay, even in first gen you might try several drugs. If all of those are not working, then you go to second gen. Some specific differences between first gen and second gen is that though it will not properly block dopamine, it is specifically a weak dopamine blocker, and it is a weak dopamine blocker. This fellow has prominent serotonin. So serotonin will also be written as 5-HT3, okay, 5-hydroxytryptophan, 5-HT3. The 3 is a subscript, I'm not able to write it here, that is why I've written in that way. But 5-HT3, serotonin will also be named as 5-HT3 in some textbooks. Okay, it has prominent serotonin antagonistic effects. I told you, first generation and second generation in general, whenever you see a psychotic disorder, it is either a problem in dopamine or in serotonin. At least it is hypothesized that either one of them is wrong. Sometimes both of them can also be out of place, wherein the levels are way too high or way too low. Way too low, bole to some other disorder will occur, but generally in psychosis, you will have either high dopamine or high serotonin, or both of them are high. Okay. Second gen will specifically work on serotonin where it is decreasing its effects. One big advantage against when compared to first generation is that it will have very low incidence of EPS. So advantages over first gen. Right. The advantages being very low incidence of EPS. Extrapyramidal symptoms are almost nil in second generation antipsychotics. Sedation is low. Other than that, you will not have any endocrine side effects. So no problem in secretions and things like that. Alright, and this is very effective in patients who are resistant to CPZ. You will find patients who are resistant to CPZ. In them, chlorpromazine will not work. In those specific patients, you can give second generation antipsychotics. So one specific antipsychotic, we'll discuss two important ones. So the first one is clozapine. Now, clozapine is a very effective antipsychotic with very low incidence of EPS. Though it will directly block serotonin, there are some specific side effects. Specifically, you will have agranulocytosis. Okay, increase in the amount of agranulocytes, marked increase, a very high amount of agranulocytosis, or a very high amount of agranulocytes will be formed in that patient. Okay, that is the biggest disadvantage of clozapine. That can lead to several problems. If you have agranulocytes being more than they are necessary in your body, they can cause almost fatality in some patients. That they can lead to death in some patients. That is why it is restricted only to patients who are not responding to first generation. All right. One thing you need to monitor whenever you are giving um, clozapine is that monitor WBC levels closely, almost 2 times a day, or maybe even more if possible. ठीक है, minimum 2 times a day or at least 1 time a day कैसा भी देखना पड़ता WBC levels. ठीक है, because if agranulocytosis occurs and an emergency occurs, the patient will immediately go into a condition where it will be harder to bring them back. All right, that is a problem with clozapine. Another thing is that this fellow can cause a little bit of sedation. So there is that. Weight gain and hypertension are common. So weight gain, hypotension, and mild sedation. Tell the patient to avoid driving whenever they are taking clozapine. So that is about clozapine. Then we have one very popular drug, second generation antipsychotic called risperidone. Risperidone will block both serotonin and dopamine. Okay, and will block both the receptors. It also blocks alpha 1 adrenergic receptor, and it will block histamine receptors, H1 receptors. So it is effective in the positive and negative symptoms of schizophrenia. Now, we didn't go into schizophrenia, but I did tell you that schizophrenia is a disorder in which the patient will be hallucinating a lot. And see, the symptoms of his schizophrenia can be divided into positive and negative symptoms, in the sense that positive does not mean that it is good for them. Positive basically means that they have something new, or things like they will imagine things which are not present. So delusions, hallucinations, thought disorders, those are positive symptoms. Whereas negative symptoms will be poverty in speech. It is also called alogia. They will not be able to talk. Okay, they will not want to talk, and they will not be able to talk. That is one. They will have social withdrawal. They will not interact socially. They will have lack of energy and lack of initiative. They will have very poor concentration. Those are negative symptoms. So now you understand the difference between positive and negative symptoms. Positive being they are making things up. Okay, that is hallucinations and things like that, delusions, hallucinations, and thought disorders. Negative symptoms will be lack of something. Right? Concentration is lower, they're not speaking enough. Risperidone will work for both of them. All right, so it is very good for schizophrenics. So used commonly in schizophrenia. One of the most commonly used antipsychotics actually. Another advantage is that at low doses you will not see any EPS. If you give a low dose of risperidone, you will not see any extrapyramidal symptoms altogether. Right? Normally, the dose of risperidone is around 2 to 12 mg, okay, per day. You give small doses. Okay, very few. Chlorpromazine thoda बढ़ के है, 100 to 800 mg per day है, but other antipsychotics are relatively low. Even clozapine is like 50 mg to 300 mg, max 300 mg per day. This is very less, 2 to 12 mg per day, not more than that. Adverse effects of risperidone include nausea, anorexia, drowsiness, and sometimes it can cause cerebrovascular disease, as in stroke. So it can increase the incidence of stroke. At least if a patient has some other cardiovascular disorder in them, it can increase the risk of cerebrovascular disease. So that is about our antipsychotics. This will conclude both um, first generation and second generation. Now we'll discuss about anti-anxiety drugs or anxiolytics. Okay. So anti-anxiety drugs. We have technically discussed a lot of the classes that come under anti-anxiety drugs. So the classes that come under this classification will be benzodiazepines, So we've already discussed the benzodiazepine. Your standard benzodiazepine that is given for anti-anxiety is diazepam. Okay, it will also, you can also use lorazepam and alprazolam. By the way, what is the mechanism of action of benzodiazepines? अपन दो तीन बार discuss कर लिए benzodiazepines. How do benzodiazepines work? You cannot tell, you didn't, I didn't explain. दो तीन जगह पढ़ लिए अपन. What is benzodiazepines? How do benzodiazepines work? You can answer it orally or through chat. Either way is fine. Something, nothing. क्या करते हैं? Come on, you should be able to tell. No, no one. Ay, 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 ay.
So GABA receptors.
It is a hypnotic. Okay, how does it work? GABA receptor. Yeah, what does it do to GABA receptor?
CNS depression.
That is the effect, ma. How does it work?
It binds to the GABA receptor.
And
It increases the frequency of calcium channel opening.
पक्का वो बार्बिचुरेट्स का काम नहीं है. तुम लोग देख के तो भी बोल रहे, तो जरा करेक्ट देख के बोलो ना रे, ऐसा के. Please do not confuse between barbiturates and benzodiazepines. One is increasing the lifetime or of chlorine channel opening. The other will literally open more number of chlorine channels. Who is who? Please make sure you memorize. I'm kind of terrified for y'all. What will happen in your exams? If you don't memorize these, it will be very, very hard. Okay. Right. Benzodiazepines is one. Then we have beta blockers. Beta blockers are specifically beta adrenergic blockers. Okay. We studied about adrenergic blockers. We studied about beta agonists in asthma. If you remember, beta 2 agonists, long acting, short acting. Beta 2 agonists we studied about, which was stimulating beta receptors. Beta adrenergic blockers will do exactly opposite. These will specifically work, or at least you want them to work on excuse me, your beta 2. So that is present in your heart. Propranolol. Okay, when we study about CVS drugs, we'll discuss a little bit more about beta adrenergic blockers. You have a whole classification of beta drugs, but for now, beta adrenergic blockers are those that will block the adrenergic receptors through the beta type of adrenergic receptors, basically. So that can be given in anxiety. Now, why you use this? Sometimes anxious patients can get a heart attack. Okay, and they will go into arrhythmias, or they can go into they can have cardiac problems even by see, anxiety is something that is very specific to patient, from patient to patient. Some patient might get anxious over exams, some patients might get anxious by seeing dirt, or some patients might get anxious by seeing disorganization or things like that. There are different things people will get anxious to, all right, different situations in life. So in some patients, see, more or less anxiety is a condition which will be experienced by all of us, but not to an extent where it is showing clinical symptoms and it is showing it needs pharmacological intervention. When it needs pharmacological interventions, that is an anxiety disorder. Okay, it is not just simple anxiety. You and I, almost everyone has anxiety related to some or the other situation. Okay, let's suppose you are going on a what do you call, some kind of a ride or something in a circus or things like that. You see, right, those giant wheels and things like that. When you sit in that, you feel fear and you feel anxious. What will happen, I don't know, things like that. That is fine and all, but if you feel that all the time, that is an anxiety disorder. All right, that can be detrimental to someone's heart. So that is why beta blockers are given. Then you have something called serotonin blockers. Serotonin blockers. These are kind of different from what you give in your antipsychotics. Okay, specifically buspirone and gepirone. Okay. These are partial agonists. We'll discuss about them a little bit more in the next class. But these three are the basic types of drugs that you give in anxiety. All right, we'll discuss about buspirone in a little more detail in the next class. Take your attendance.